Hey guys, tonight we're venturing into something raw, vast and downright ruthless. Life in the Roman Empire. Forget senators' robes or emperors' palaces. There are no gilded wreaths or steaming marble baths here. Tonight you're not a triumphant Caesar. You're an unprepared stranger, navigating a world of worn sandals, filth-choked alleys, and the ever-present spectre of state-sanctioned punishment. So if you're curious or a little brave, hit like and subscribe. But only if you're ready for a slow, immersive history that lulls as much as it warns. Drop a comment with where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I love knowing whose midnight or moonlit hour we share. Alright, turn down the lights, switch on that gentle fan for a soft hum, and get cozy. Take a slow, soothing breath. Imagine yourself, just before dawn, standing at the edge of a narrow flagstone street. The city is rumbling awake, and with every breath you draw, you sense both possibility and peril. This is Rome at first light, and surviving one morning here is no small feat. Feel the vibration underfoot as dawn's first light glints off iron-rimmed wheels. A chariot thunders past, its two horses straining at the reins, manes flying like banners in the breeze. It's barely daylight, yet already the street is alive with motion. Warhorse carriages bearing armored legionaries, merchant wagons heaped high with amphorae of olive oil and wine, rickety carts overloaded with firewood. Each set of wooden wheels bound in iron clatters on the uneven stones, creating a steady percussion that almost lulls you into a trance until a sudden screech of wood on cobblestone cleaves through the air, a sharp reminder that danger rides with every passing axle. Roman streets were rarely more generous than a modern hallway. On either side, insulae towering apartment blocks of stone and concrete rose 4 or 5 stories high, windowless on the lower levels, open-air galleries above. No elevators, no guardrails, no warning signs, just stacked stone and wood, leaning ever so slightly inward with age. In this tight corridor, every step must be measured. Lean too far into the street to greet a neighbor, and your tunic's hem might catch on a passing wheel. Lean too far onto the curb to avoid a donkey's bray, and you risk tumbling into the narrow ditch that collects rainwater and refuse. Imagine your pulse quickening as a chariot's wheel clips the hem of your garment, an unsettling brush that leaves you wondering if your heart or your clothing will hold. When a driver miscalculates a turn, tragedy follows in an instant. Picture a merchant's wagon, its wheels catching an edge of stone, veering sharply, there's no room to swerve. You find yourself caught between 2 iron rims, pinned against the hard edge of a building. The carriage shudders, then rolls past, leaving you crumpled in dust and slate. Or perhaps a charioteer, eyes fixed on the road ahead, underestimates your pace. You hear the breeze of hooves, feel a sudden jolt, then only silence. Some survivors ended each day with nothing but a nervous twitch in their left leg, an unrelenting souvenir of a near-fatal miscalculation. Even for those who escaped outright disaster, each collision left an imprint on the community. Shopkeepers paused in their stalls, shaken, hands trembling as they clutched jars of garum or loaves of bread. Children darted out of the way, squealing in alarm, and their mothers clucked anxious tongues until the danger passed. And the clamour of rescue, the frantic cries of stallholders pulling fallen travellers clear, added another layer to the morning's tumult. Dear listener, we're merely observing these hazards from the safety of modern hindsight. You're likely accustomed to the reassurance of crosswalks, traffic lights, even pedestrian signs emblazoned with friendly figures. In ancient Rome, none of these comforts existed. Your survival depended on a sharp eye to spot oncoming wheels, a nimble foot to slip out of the way, and, if you were fortunate, a small coin discreetly slipped to the driver, a gesture that might earn you a friendly nod instead of a crushed ankle. So as you settle into the soft hum of your fan and ease deeper into this story, remember, every rumble beneath your feet, every clatter against stone speaks to a world where a single misstep could mean the end of your morning, long before breakfast ever reached your lips. As dawn's first pale light spills over Rome's rooftops, it's not just human footfalls that stir the streets, it's the clatter and murmur of livestock staking their claim. Picture a bleating chorus as goats navigate the maze of stalls, their curious eyes gleaming in torchlight. Donkeys, backs bowed under the weight of olive oil jars strapped in crates, shuffle by in plumes of dust. Pigs, pink-skinned, curly-tailed root at loose crumbs of yesterday's bread, snuffling and grunting in earnest pursuit of a meager breakfast. With each hoof and snout comes a dollop of fresh droppings, smearing the flagstones in a slick sheen. The tang is unmistakable, a heady mix of ammonia and earth, tinged with the faint sweet undernote of straw. You feel it before you see it, the tiny slip of your sandal, the soft glorp of mud against leather. Your arms windmill in desperation, seeking purchase on rough walls or passing market wares, until gravity reasserts its authority and you land on damp stone, a muffled thud in the cool morning hush. For a moment the world stops. You sprawled in manure-splattered tunic and the livestock oblivious to your plight. Every eye in the immediate vicinity drifts toward the spectacle. A stallholder pausing mid-bargain, a baker's apprentice letting a loaf slide on the counter, and perhaps a pickpocket, eyebrow raised, calculating whether you're worth targeting after such an undignified pratfall. Goats are the original urban scavengers. Their nimble hooves tap-tap across broken pottery and scattered straw, noses twitching. They'll snuffle beneath market tables, searching for a stray olive pit or half-eaten fig. If you linger too close, their curiosity becomes boldness. A quick upward jerk of a head and your cloak's soft flowing is mistaken for a tempting shrub. The sudden horn's touch can jar your shoulder or snag fabric, leaving you a half-torn tunic and a bruised ego. Donkeys, meanwhile, lumber along predictable routes, but misjudge a turn can spill precious jars crashing to cobblestones. The sharp crack of ceramic echoing off stone walls is enough to startle horse, human and goat alike, setting off a chaotic stampede that sees livestock, carts and the occasional stray puppy weaving through the crowd. In this menagerie, practical wisdom reigns supreme. Tug your cloak close to your body, fold away its soft drape so no curious goat can yank it free, slip into sandals with thick ridged soles, footwear that bites into the muck rather than skimming across it. Keep your hands free of food scraps, no spare crumb is worth a close encounter with a hungry pig. And if you do find yourself mid-tumble, let your fall be graceful enough to avoid injury, and entertaining enough to distract any would-be petty criminal. After all, in Rome, a little humility can be your shield. You might recall fondly your city's quaint petting zoo, or that time you dodged a runaway goat at the county fair. Here in ancient Rome, such a caper could cost you not only your dignity, but perhaps a broken arm or at least a lasting bruise. So the next time you encounter a wayward billy goat, consider the stakes, a moment's amusement for onlookers, and for you a reminder that even the smallest creature can wield considerable power on slippery terrain. In the swirl of dawn's awakening, it isn't only hooves and wheels you must watch. It's fellow Romans who thrive on stealth and trickery. These human predators drift through the crowds in plain view, moving like shadows at noon. Every gesture, every price negotiation can mask a deft hand ready to relieve you of your coins. Imagine strolling past a stall adorned with ripening figs, their purplish skins glistening with morning dew. A voice murmurs, "Fresh fruit, sweetest in all of Rome." You pause, drawn by the promise of a juicy treat. As you reach forward, the vendor's partner, clad in similar garb, edges beside you, mimicking your curiosity. One smooth motion, a cloak twirls, and the second vendor's fingers have already slipped beneath your belt pouch. Before you realize what's happened, both figures melt back into the throng, leaving only the faint rustle of fabric and the lingering aroma of fruit. You inspect your waist and discover your purse is lighter by a dozen coins or more, while the figs remain untouched. A few steps later, you encounter a snake charmer, kneeling over a brass brazier. The reptile's hood flares, and a child shrieks in delight. You lean in for a closer look, entranced by the hypnotic sway of the serpent. At that same instant, another hand, swift and practiced, bristles against your sleeve, then ghosts away. Your coin purse is gone before the child's laughter fades. You swing around, heart-pounding, to see nothing but oblivious onlookers applauding the charmer's flourish. These street performers are experts in illusion. While one arm captivates with a flick of the wrist, the other slips into your pocket. The thieving troupe operates with silent choreography. No spoken cue, no overt signal, just a shared glance and a mutual understanding that your loss is their gain. Perhaps you sense something amiss and shout, "Thief!" Instantly the air fills with startled gasps. Yet accusing voices draw more chaos than justice. From a shadowy corner, an accomplice springs forth. A wiry figure with nimble legs delivers a well-placed kick to your shin and then vanishes into the labyrinth of alleys. The commotion disperses quicker than it forms. Merchants resume their haggling, and you're left nursing both indignity and bruising pain. In this unforgiving environment, protesting loudly is a double-edged sword. It may startle the thief, but it also exposes you to physical reprisal, or to other predators who relish the spectacle of weakness. A calm acceptance, at least outwardly, often proves the safer choice, even if inwardly you seethe at the injustice. To navigate these perilous streets, consider a few precautions. Conceal valuables. Belt pouches tucked beneath your tunic are harder to spot and pricier to extract. Minimal luggage, carry only what you need, leave excess wealth secured at home or entrusted to a reliable banker. Alert awareness? Briefly scan the faces around you. A sliding gaze can deter some opportunists. Distrust flattery. Vendors with unusually friendly smiles often have ulterior motives. One can almost hear the thief's wry adage echoing down the crowded lanes. Bread is free, but coin is dear. Indeed, in ancient Rome, you don't need enemies or wild beasts. Your greatest threat may well be the neighbor brushing past you, hand poised to make off with your hard-earned denarii. So keep your purse close, your wits about you, and a wry smile ready for the next vanishing act. Now, picture yourself at dawn's first glow, stepping into a small plaza ringed with marble fountains. You raise a bronze cup beneath one of the spouts, expecting a fresh burst of crystal-clear water. Instead, you feel a hesitant drip, warm, sluggish, tinged with a metallic aftertaste. You lean closer and inhale, faintly sweet, faintly sour, with an undercurrent of minerals long leached from the pipes themselves. Rome's engineers proudly boasted of aqueducts stretching for miles, arches soaring above valleys, tunnels burrowing beneath hills. On the surface it was a marvel, water cascading in a perfect unbroken stream. Beneath your feet, however, ran pipes fashioned from soft lead, chosen for its malleability and resistance to corrosion. Over the years, mineral deposits, limestone, calcium, bits of sand, accumulated on the pipe interiors. Those channels narrowed imperceptibly, turning a free-flowing gush into a sluggish trickle that sputters uncertainly into your cup. Each morning, citizens gathered at these fountains for their daily ration, oblivious to the invisible gift the city bestowed upon them. Lead, a heavy metal, seeped into the water over time, imparting a faintly sweet tang. For a while you might not notice anything amiss, until subtle symptoms set in, headaches that throb in time with your pulse, a creeping fatigue that no amount of rest can erase. In a society that prized vigor and strength, many simply chalked these ailments up to long hours or poor diet, never realizing the culprit lay in the very water meant to sustain them. As spring ripened into summer, warmth invited unwelcome guests into the aqueduct's more stagnant stretches. In hidden hollows where flow slowed, algae flourished. If you drew water too near the end of these reaches, you'd see fine green threads swirling in your cup, clinging like wispy seaweed. The scent was a low sour note, half rotten vegetation, half stagnant pond. Occasionally, silt and debris, tiny fragments of stone flaked from ancient tunnels would accumulate. You might spot flecks of grey in the thin stream, or feel a slight grit against your tongue. Most days you shrugged and drank anyway. Thirst in Rome was not a courtesy but a command. Some resourceful citizens attempted rudimentary filtration, pouring water through fine linen, hoping to catch algae blooms or chunky sediment. Others allowed the water to stand in open jars overnight, letting heavier particles settle before drawing off the clearer top layer. Yet these measures did little to remove dissolved minerals or the unseen lead. Imagine that moment of hesitation as you raise the cup, the silent question of whether to drink. You scan the plaza, faces equally parched, equally resigned. Refusal seems almost impolite, an admission of weakness. Survival in ancient Rome often meant choosing between two discomforts, risking sickness from impure water or succumbing to exhaustion in the relentless sun. And so, you press your lips to the spout. The water cool at first, a welcome reprieve, then turns unsettlingly heavy, like sipping molten snow. You swallow, and hope your decision won't cost you more than a stomachache. As mid-morning sun slants through narrow alleys, the inevitable summons comes. Nature calls. You step off the bustling street and into the cool shadow of a public latrine, joining a silent procession of Roman senators in crisp togas, labouring slaves whose tunics bear the stains of early chores, and merchants still sticky from honeyed wares. Along one wall stretches a long marble bench, its surface worn smooth by generations of use. Carved into the slab are a series of keyhole-shaped seats, each opening poised above a narrow channel designed to whisk waste away. Marvel at the simplicity. A single slab of stone for every user. No individual stalls, no privacy screens, just swift efficiency. Yet beneath this elegant design lurks hidden peril. Stone after decades of use can weaken and fracture. A rotten board, perhaps weakened by a root that found its way through the foundation or chipped by hundreds of sandals, might give way under your weight. Imagine the moment. You settle onto the cool marble and shift your weight forward. There's a subtle creak, a hairline crack snaking outward like frost on glass. Before you can stand, the stone tilts, and you plunge downward, arms flailing. For a breathless moment, you're airborne. Then you land with a splash in the open sewer below, water gurgling around your ankles and whatever else you were carrying. Above you, a handful of onlookers gasp, hands flying to togas. One senator recoils so dramatically his wig nearly topples free. A slave manual laborer tuts, already planning to collect the reward for your rescue. You clamber back up, shoulders dripping, dignity in tatters, but at least you're alive. The engineers anticipated such mishaps. Mostly, a constant flood of water from a nearby aqueduct feeds the channel beneath the bench, intended to carry waste swiftly away toward the Tiber's embrace. On a good day, the current is brisk enough to prevent stagnation, and you hear its steady rush like a distant brook. But Rome is no stranger to clogs. Waste, straw, and the occasional dropped sandal can conspire to form a dam. One morning, everything seems routine until a low gurgle turns to a bubbling roar. You glance down to see water swirling, not disappearing but rising. A moment later, a fetid wave surges toward you, splattering up against the marble, sending scraps of soiled paper and matter onto the bench. You leap aside just in time, heart pounding, as the backflow retreats, leaving a slick sheen on stone and a reminder that even the most well-designed system can falter. A light joke springs to mind. Despite your racing pulse, you always wanted to make a splash in Rome, just perhaps not this way. Shared discomfort breeds a curious camaraderie. Neighbours exchange sympathetic glances, some offering spare cloths to brush away splatter. A merchant offers you a scrap of bread, half mossy but clean, as consolation. Even a senator cracks a half-smile, adjusting his toga to hide unwelcome dampness. In these communal latrines, social barriers blur. The high-born and low-born alike confront the same vulnerabilities: the fickle stone, the unpredictable water flow, and the ever-present threat of an embarrassing mishap. For a few moments, you're part of a single community united by necessity and the humbling recognition that, beneath the grandeur of Rome, every citizen is bound by the same frailties of flesh and infrastructure. So, as you rise and dust off your tunic, mindful of any lingering cracks beneath your feet, remember that public sanitation in ancient Rome was an act of faith. You trusted stone, water, and your fellow Romans to uphold a fragile promise of cleanliness. And sometimes that promise washed away. While you settle onto the marble bench and mind your balance, remember what lies just beneath: the dark, twisting belly of the Cloaca Maxima. This vast open channel, Rome's grand sewer, carries the city's waste toward the Tiber, a testament to engineering prowess and a warning to the unwary. In that murky water scurry creatures you'd rather not imagine. Rats, some as large as small cats, their coarse fur matted with slime. Each of these rodents is a walking disease vector. Fleas hop from rodent to human at lightning speed. One moment a rat darts past your foot, the next a tiny flea leaps onto your leg, seeking warmth. If it bites, you may barely notice until that evening's fever sets in. Dysentery lurks in every droplet of sewer water. One small scratch, perhaps from a jagged stone at the channel's edge, can become an entry point for bacteria. Before long, redness blooms around the wound, swelling spreads, and you're left feverish and bedridden, at the mercy of local physicians armed with little more than cauterizing irons and dubious herbal poultices. Children and slaves, who lack the luxury of private latrines, bear the brunt of these infections. In a single season, entire families could be felled by the unseen armies of microbes marching from sewer to skin. Imagine the steady hammer of a headache, the queasy churn in your stomach, and the relentless fatigue that drains your strength until your world narrows to the walls of a sick room and the whispered prayers of attendants. Above you, flies gather at the latrine's rim in a dark halo. Their wings beat in a relentless buzz, a taunting lullaby that underscores the futility of clean escape. They alight on your fingers as you withdraw them from the channel, tracing invisible patterns of filth. You watch a fly feed on a droplet of water, then flit across the bench to perch on the toga of a senator, 3 seats away, satirically bridging the gap between patrician and pauper. These insects don't merely annoy, they spread pathogens with every landing. Each time a fly alights on a scrap of food or the rim of your cup, it deposits microscopic spores of bacteria collected from the latrines below. You swat twice, once for annoyance, once for fear, then remind yourself that there's no such thing as privacy here, nor any promise of hygiene. From a modern vantage point, we're fortunate to have enclosed plumbing, sealed pipes and antiseptic cleaners. Yet back then, every visit to the public latrine was a calculated risk. The Cloaca Maxima stood as a marvel of civil engineering, but its brilliance concealed a darker truth. Progress often brings perils of its own design. As you rise from the bench, mindful of the rats darting away into the gloom, you carry with you more than splatter and smell. You carry the memory of those furtive movements beneath the stone, the brush of tiny legs across your skin, and the urgent reminder that in ancient Rome, even the act of relief could turn hazardous in an instant. So the next time you pause for comfort in your own modern restroom, spare a thought for the bold souls who once shared their seats with vermin, disease, and the ever-present possibility of infection. Their sacrifice and occasional squeal helped forge a civilization, one flush at a time. Step through the low archway of a narrow insular courtyard and feel the heat ripple off stone walls. Each household, no matter how modest, nests a small hearth at its heart. Here, morning is announced by the crackle of kindling, smouldering embers coaxed into flame. A metal pot hisses as broth begins to simmer. A round of dough patted thin slides onto a hot tile to bake into a simple flatbread. The familiar rhythm of daily life plays out in miniature kitchens wedged between stairwells and shuttered windows. By mid-morning, the courtyard has become a miniature kiln. Tendrils of smoke rise in lazy spirals, weaving their way through iron railings and wooden balconies. Each plume catches the sunlight for a moment, rose gold against grey stone, before dissipating into a haze that hangs over the street below. You brush at your tunic and observe a thin, sooty patina clinging to the cloth. The fine dust coats every surface, the lintel above the hearth, the lip of a clay jug, your own hairline. It's a silent declaration that fresh air is a luxury reserved for the patrician villas on the Palatine Hill, far from the crowded insulae. Neighbours emerge onto their galleries, hands raised to shield their eyes from the glare and the soot. A child's laughter turns to a cough as she waves a small hand in front of her face. A washerwoman peers into her dipped basin and frowns at the grey tint swirling in what should be clear water. Even the birds, usually flitting through shafts of sunlight, navigate the gloom warily, their feathers dotted with black flecks as they shake out their wings. You breathe in, expecting warmth and spice, a hint of roasting grain or seasoned broth. But instead you taste ash, a charcoal bitterness that coats your tongue. There's a subtle trace of charred olive pits, snapped from broken amphorae by hungry mice last night. It's not painful, but it lingers, settling in the back of your throat like a stubborn guest that refuses to leave. Each inhalation brings the same smoky greeting, a reminder that you and your neighbours share every breath. Inhaling deeply feels almost indulgent, as if you're trying to draw in hope along with the smoke. Yet every exhale returns the haze to the collective cloud, joining countless others to form a grey blanket that cloaks the city. Despite the discomfort, there's a comforting regularity to the smoke's dance. It curls and drifts in predictable patterns, a living tapestry that unites dozens of hearths in a communal ritual. One could almost forget the grime it imparts and instead regard it as the city's morning incense, clear proof that life stirs behind each shuttered door. If you ever thought city smog was purely a modern invention, try stepping back into this haze without a gas mask. You might wind up coughing out the day's worries, along with half a tunic's worth of soot. Yet somehow in this cloud of smoke, there is also the promise of a fresh-baked loaf, a savoury stew, and the pulsing life of Rome itself, rising, heaving and breathing as one. Raise your gaze above the narrow street, and you'll see a jumble of rooftops, stitched together like a patchwork quilt. Thick wooden beams lie exposed beneath rows of curved clay tiles, and on the cheaper insula, bundles of dried straw and reed thatch spill over eaves in haphazard layers. These rooftops serve as the city's shield against rain and sun, but they carry a hidden danger that could turn calm dawn into raging inferno within moments. Imagine a rooftop brazier, an iron bowl filled with smouldering coals, left unattended by a distracted cook. The stray ember drifts upward, carried by a lazy swirl of smoke, and lands in the thatch, a single glowing ember in a tinderbox. At first, there's a faint psh as dry straws ignite. Then comes the crackle, a sharp, rapid-fire staccato like wood snapping under a sudden freeze. Flames lick across the thatch in hungry tongues, consuming layers of straw with alarming speed. Ash drifts down like mournful snow, settling on wooden shutters and clay tiles below. A thin veil of grey descends over the street. You might catch a spark on your shoulder, a tiny light that sputters out before you can brush it away. The fire's orange glow spreads, reflected in windows across the block and mirrored in terrified eyes that peer from behind shutters. What began as a mere ember in the sky's lower reaches transforms in seconds into a dancing wall of flame, climbing from roof to roof, as though intent on consuming the very sky itself. Underneath the blaze, the wooden framework, beams, rafters, joists begins to weaken. Heat leaches the moisture from the aged timbers, turning sturdy wood into brittle charcoal. Groaning sounds rise from within the roof's belly as the load becomes too great. Then, without warning, a massive beam surrenders. You see it first in a sudden shift in the fire's pattern, a darkness where flame had roared. Before you can react, the beam snaps, crashing through the clay tiles in a spray of debris. A dusty cloud billows upward, obscuring the sky. The street below fills with a rumble, and you realize you're directly beneath the collapse zone. No building codes govern this moment. No enforced fire breaks stand between you and disaster. In their absence, neighbors spring into action. Shouts ring out, "Water! Buckets! Pass along the chain!" Leather buckets appear, filled from a nearby fountain, and a line forms. You join the human chain, hauling water aloft, each handoff deliberate and steady. The heat prickles your skin, an electric warning that the fire's reach extends beyond timber and tile into flesh and bone. Imagine yourself dodging cinders as they rain down, the acrid scent of burning straw filling your nostrils. You feel the pulse of the courtyard fountain at your back, its cool splash a stark contrast to the fire's scorching breath. Together with your neighbors, you aim water at the roaring blaze, stream by stream, seeking to pull the fire back from the brink. In a single moment, a family's home, once a sanctuary of morning bread making and midday naps, can become ashes and memories. Walls that watched children grow, where laughter echoed and fireside tales were told, vanish in embers and smoke. And yet, amid the fear and chaos, there is solidarity, a reminder that in this unforgiving city, survival often depends on collective effort, on hands meeting hands in a chain of hope against the inevitable trials of life in ancient Rome. As the sun climbs higher, the ambient roar of Rome's daily toil swells into a living soundtrack. You pause in a narrow street, letting the clamour wash over you, each strike, each shout, a note in the grand symphony of empire building. Listen first to the crisp ping of flint against marble, echoing off walls like distant bells. A mason, chisel braced at an angle, sends tiny chips of white stone scattering to the ground. With each blow, the chisel sinks a fraction deeper, shaping blocks destined for temples, aqueduct arches, or the grand basilicas where emperors hold court. The work is unhurried yet unrelenting. Under the mason's practiced hand, rough-hewn limestone yields to precise angles, polished surfaces, and the promise of architectural splendor. Yet perfection demands risk. One misplaced strike, and a 5-pound slab of marble can fracture unpredictably, sending shards clattering to the street below. Imagine a careless tap echoing with a sudden crack, followed by the thunderous fall of stone, dust billowing in a cloud that shrouds both worker and passerby. Even as you weave through this gallery of craftsmanship, your senses remain alert. Every overhanging keystone, each scaffold-supported lintel, whispers of potential peril. And yet, amid the danger, there is beauty in the rhythm. The rise and fall of hammer on chisel, a steady pulse that marks both creation and caution. A few steps further, you encounter the glow of a forge window. Inside, a blacksmith plunges a red-hot blade into a trough of water. The hiss of steam surges outward, mingling with the crackle of coal burning bright. Metal rings out under hammer blows. Clang, ding, clang. Sparks arch into the morning air like embers caught in a breeze. The smith's work is as much art as alchemy. Molten iron surrenders its shape, hammered and folded until it gleams with promise. Each sword blade must balance strength and flexibility, edge and endurance, for it will serve Rome's legions on distant frontiers. You inhale the scent of hot metal and coal, an earthy metallic aroma that lingers on your tunic and under your fingernails. Beyond blades, smaller tools emerge, nails for building insulae, horseshoes for the city's steeds, hinges for temple doors. In every spark that flies, you witness transformation, raw material yielding to human will, a silent testament to the empire's ceaseless demand for both utility and power. Off in the distance, a different cadence rises, the steady thud-thud of marching boots, punctuated by clipped commands, ad luc, forward, forward. You feel the ground vibrate beneath your feet as cohorts of legionaries advance in perfect formation. Their shields align in gleaming phalanx, armor shining like rippling steel fields, spears thrust forward in synchronized arcs. The unity is mesmerizing, the discipline palpable. In this display, Rome's greatest strength order reveals itself. Yet for you, a lone observer, the drills are both impressive and overwhelming. They drown out any hope of silence, replacing it with the relentless insistence of duty. Every strike of hammer on chisel, every ring of forged steel, every measured footstep in military drill is part lullaby, part warning. A lullaby that lulls the city toward perfection, and a warning that progress can be deafening. As you breathe deeply, inhale the scent of stone dust, hot iron and disciplined sweat. Remember that in ancient Rome the sounds of creation and conquest were inescapably intertwined, guiding both empire and individual toward their fates. As the morning sun climbs higher, the call of the arena drifts on the warm breeze. Perhaps you decide to seek distraction in Rome's grand spectacles. The Colosseum rises like a stone leviathan, not far off, its arched corridors promising both awe and dread. Beyond it, the Circus Maximus stretches an endless oval, its tiered seating packed with thousands eager for the clatter of hooves and the thrill of combat. You slip through a side gate into the Colosseum's shadow. The grey stones cool beneath your hand. Inside, the arena floor stretches out like a stage set for ritual conflict. Sand crunches underfoot as you find a seat among citizens of every rank, from toga-clad patricians to ragged labourers. A hush falls, then roars as combatants enter, their armour glinting in the sunlight. There's a strange juxtaposition between spectator and spectacle. On one hand, you witness men clashing steel with steel, shields splintering, the occasional heavy thud of metal meeting flesh. On the other, the distant clang of construction and the hum of street life remind you that outside these walls, life's dangers await in the marketplace and back alleys. The thrill of battle is strangely muted by that broader soundtrack of urban peril. You watch detached as a murmillo parries a thrust from a rhetorius. Sparks fly from their clashing weapons, but the real spark is in the crowd's bloodlust. Cheers swelling, then crashing in waves. As one gladiator falters, the audience holds its breath. Yet for you, the excitement is tempered by juxtaposition. You've already faced more subtle threats this morning. Chariot wheels, pickpockets, seething smoke. Here, death is dramatic and public. Outside, it arrives in quieter form. An hour later, you wander toward the Circus Maximus, where the air thrums with anticipation. The oval track curves away before you, lined with painted spina, central dividing walls adorned with obelisks and lap counters. The distant clip-clop of horses grows louder as charioteers mount their two-wheeled war chariots. At the sound of the magistrate's trumpet, the gates thunder open, and they surge forth in a cloud of dust. The chariots lean perilously into the tight turns at each end, horses straining at the reins. You feel an empathetic shiver as the wheel on one chariot scrapes a boundary marker, wood splintering with a sudden crack. A collective gasp rises. One false move, one misjudged bend, and both driver and horses would be flung into the adjacent tunnel or trampled under hoof. The thundering hoofbeats echo in your chest, a pounding reminder that survival here demands both speed and precision. In the stands, spectators lean forward, eyes wide, hearts racing. You too feel the tension build, not because you're invested in any faction's glory, but because the brink of disaster captivates the imagination. A loose rein, a snagged wheel, and the cheering turns to a desperate scramble to avoid the tumbling wreckage on the track. And all this free admission to nearly certain peril. It's hard to find a better deal in the ancient world, a front row seat to danger without spending a single sestertius. Yet as you settle back in your seat, the sun warming your shoulders, you realize the true purpose of these spectacles extends beyond mere entertainment. They serve as a social valve, releasing collective anxieties through ritualized violence and high-speed spectacle. Here, in the roar of the crowd and the flash of steel, the citizens of Rome find both distraction and cohesion, united by the shared thrill of observing life teeter on the edge and surviving to cheer another day. Even if the roar of the Colosseum or the thunder of chariot hooves isn't your calling. Another ritual draws every Roman to the public squares, the grain dole. Here, the promise of a daily ration of wheat becomes both comfort and reminder. Comfort that your belly might not rumble tomorrow, and reminder that your very survival hinges on the goodwill of those in power. Imagine an open plaza beneath a carved marble portico. A long queue snakes through the morning shadows. Nobles with carefully draped togas, merchants dusted in flour, weathered field hands in patched tunics, and wide-eyed children clutching parents' hands. Each carries a small token, an inscribed tablet or stamped token, issued by the aludiles, officials who oversee the dole. As you step forward, the clatter of wooden scoops echoes. A clerk with ink-stained fingers measures out a handful of grain into your clay amphora. The wheat coarse, sometimes riddled with shards of chaff, feels heavy in your hands. You feel the weight of hope. Enough grain today may stretch into tomorrow's meal, or even the next day if the gods and the politicians smile upon you. Yet this gift is not charity. It is a calculated gesture. You sense that each kernel carries political currency, sown by those who seek favor or fear unrest. A murmur ripples through the crowd when someone mentions the rising cost of imported grain or the lean yield of last season's harvest. The line shifts and you step forward again, knowing that tomorrow the same ritual will beckon, uncertain as the wind. With amphora tucked under your arm, you wander toward another plaza that hosts the day's entertainment. Along with your grain, the state provides spectacle. Gladiators locked in combat with death, wild beasts roaring from their cages, and mock naval battles on flooded arenas. You find a place on the worn steps and break a chunk of coarse, dense flatbread, its flavor rustic and underwhelming. You chew thoughtfully, observing the crowd's shifting expressions. A slave, muscles rippling beneath his pallid skin, stands in the arena's center, facing down a lion that pads forward, jaws parting in a low growl. The audience leans in unison, eyes alight with a mix of fascination and dread. Yet in this moment, slave and lion share a singular fate. Survival depends on prowess and fortune. As you swallow the last of your bread, you realize envy feels strange here. The slave risks life for fleeting fame. The lion fights for its next meal. Your daily struggle for sustenance and safety seems less precarious in comparison, yet no less real. The illusion of choice is clear: starve without grain or gamble life in the arena. You might pause and wonder which is more dangerous, facing the hunger gnawing at your belly or staring down a lion's jaws. Both threaten the same end, though in vastly different fashions. One is a slow surrender to weakness, the other a swift reckoning of tooth and claw. In Rome, the phrase bread and circuses rings with both comfort and critique. The grain keeps the populace fed, and the games keep them entertained. Together they pacify potential unrest. You sense the subtle exchange, your loyalty and participation for a day's survival and diversion. So as you rise from the steps, amphora empty and hunger momentarily sated, remember that in this ancient city, the simplest food and the grandest spectacle serve the same ends. They bind the community in a delicate balance of need and distraction, ensuring that for one more day, the empire's machinery hums on, its promise and peril entwined in every morsel of bread and every echoing cheer. Finally, turn your thoughts to the city's self-appointed guardians, the vigiles, Rome's night watch, daytime patrol, and fire brigade, all rolled into one. Ideally, they're meant to keep order in the winding alleys, quell fires before they rage out of control, and offer some sense of protection. In practice, however, many have discovered that bribery is far more profitable than bravery. Imagine an alleyway dimmed by overhanging balconies, where shadows pool like ink on the damp stone. You see a vigil resting against a pillar, his wooden truncheon dangling from one hand. His gaze drifts over the crowd, but not with the intensity of duty. Instead, he watches the crowd as though searching for something more interesting than crime. A street vendor offering cheap pottery tips, a pouch of coins into the vigil's rough palm. Instantly, the watchman's posture relaxes further. In return for this modest gift, enough to buy a few loaves of bread and maybe a grappa, he tolerates the vendor's impromptu stall, even though vending without a license is strictly forbidden. A small price for a license to operate in a lucrative spot. You walk by, noticing neither the vendor nor the watchman acknowledge you. The vendor speaks in low tones, passing coins and nodding toward a cluster of pickpockets working the crowd. The vigil's eyes flicker but remain unmoving. He's learned the art of selective inattentiveness, choose which infractions to ignore and which to enforce based on the size of the bribe. In other corners you might see a vigil lounging atop a low wall, arms crossed as he surveys the marketplace. To the untrained eye, his uniform and gladius, the short sword at his hip, might inspire confidence. But look closer, and you notice his eyes never track the purse snatchers weaving through the crowd. He's perfected the art of appearing busy, stamping his foot for emphasis, nodding solemnly at imagined orders, or occasionally dispatching a minor scold to a vendor he dislikes. An elderly citizen, purse in hand, approaches the watchman with a complaint. "My coins were taken just moments ago." The vigil sighs theatrically, tucks his gladius back into its sheath, and promises to investigate. 2 hours later, nothing has changed, and the victim's sightline has shifted. Meanwhile, the thief who brushed past the old man has melted into the labyrinth of streets. The vigil's true expertise lies not in enforcing Rome's laws but in avoiding actual danger. When a fire breaks out in a nearby insula, he's among the slowest to respond, waiting until the flames have leapt 2 stories before rolling up his sleeves. And when a drunken brawl erupts between rival merchants, he stands by until the coins in his purse jingle, then steps in only long enough to separate the combatants and collect his fee for restoring order. Imagine yourself, weary from the morning's perils, stepping into an alley, hoping for the reassurance of a vigilant guardian. You see the familiar silhouette and feel a momentary ease. But as pickpockets slip by, you notice the watchman's unseeing eyes. No hand moves to intercept the theft. No voice rises in warning. You realize with a mild shock, that this safety net has more holes than a poorly built aqueduct. The very presence meant to deter crime has become another layer of risk, another coin-driven calculation in a city where nothing is truly free. So as you venture onward into Rome's labyrinth of stone and shadow, carry with you the knowledge that authority here is often as porous as the aqueduct pipes you've encountered. Your best protection remains your own vigilance, a keen eye, a guarded purse, and the understanding that in ancient Rome, official protection is not a guarantee, but a service rendered only to those who can and will pay. Imagine the vast plains beyond the Euphrates, where morning mist drapes the steppe like a pale veil. There, in the half-light, stands Rodigon, a Parthian princess turned general, her silhouette defined by an unruly mane of dark hair. This was no accident of vanity or neglect, but a deliberate banner of resolve. Rodigon vowed not to wash or comb her hair until she'd crushed the rebellion that threatened her family's realm. As days bled into weeks, her tangled locks grew thick with dust and sweat, a living emblem of sacrifice. For her soldiers, this unkempt crown was more than mere theatrics. It was a daily, visible reminder that their leader had forsaken comfort and courtly grace for the rigors of war. Each strand matted with grit spoke of nights spent on damp grass, of cold dawns riding across dew-soaked fields in pursuit of insurgents. When Rodigon issued commands, her hair swayed like dark banners in the wind, an intentional display of solidarity. She understood that symbols carry power. A warrior who willingly embraced hardship could inspire loyalty deeper than any pay bonus or royal decree. Under this wild mane, her voice rang clear, each order imbued with the weight of her oath. Soldiers whispered among themselves, fingers brushing their own hair in imitation, a quiet vow that, like their queen, they would endure whatever trials lay ahead. Beyond the unwashed hair, Rodigon wove sacrifice into every aspect of camp life. She refused sandals until the first enemy stronghold fell, padding across rocky terrain in bare feet that soon bore calluses as thick as leather. She slept without a blanket under the open sky, letting each cold wind steal her resolve. Each act of self-denial was a ritual, morning drills at dawn, with only a whisper of prayer to the ancestral spirits, midday marches without shade, the sun scorching her shoulders, evening campfires lit sparingly, so her troops might savor the meager warmth. These hardships were not gratuitous displays of masochism, but strategic tools. By sharing in the discomfort, Rodigon blurred the line between royalty and common soldier. Her defeat of a rebel garrison carried more weight because she had marched alongside her men, stride for stride, wearing the same dust and sweat. Enemy scouts who glimpsed her ragged silhouette knew that this queen was not bound by palace walls. She belonged to the land and its people. That knowledge alone fractured morale among the rebels, who found themselves facing not just an army, but an indomitable spirit. Picture yourself as one of Rodigon's lieutenants, standing by the edge of camp as she lifts a hand to sweep matted hair from her brow. You note the faint glint of determination in her eyes, the gentle curve of a smile as she watches new recruits mumble their own vows. There's an intimate bond in these shared sacrifices, a subtle warmth that undercuts the chill of dawn. Rodigon's vow was more than performance. It was a lived metaphor. Each lock of hair was a thread in the tapestry of her leadership, weaving together ritual and strategy, sacrifice and confidence. And as the rebellion's last stronghold fell, she permitted her soldiers the first real celebration of victory and the first chance to tame her wild mane, turning what began as a banner of hardship into a crown of earned triumph. As the morning mists lift from Parthia's rolling plains, imagine yourself standing among Rodigon's cavalry, hearing the soft jingle of armor and the low whinny of mounted archers. Here, high-born princess and seasoned general is not content to oversee from a distant pavilion. Instead, she rides at the forefront, spear in hand, embodying the very spearheading raids she engineers against her foes. You feel the earth tremble beneath the hooves of swift steeds as Rodigon calls the charge. Without hesitation, she surges ahead, cloak streaming like a dark banner behind her. Her voice carries across ranks, a calm command, never rushed, yet impossible to ignore. In one decisive movement, she plants her spear into the heart of enemy defenses, signaling her troops to follow. In the dim light of dawn raids, her eyes glint with quiet determination. You notice how her soldiers mirror her cadence, each step, each breath, synchronized with hers. When a rebel outpost emerges from the haze, crude palisades and half-dug trenches, Rodigon dismounts with fluid grace. In the unhurried rhythm of her sword arm, she carves a path through sentries, turning a defensive guard into a fleeing scatter of terror. Her presence here is not for show. By standing shoulder to shoulder with infantry and horsemen alike, she shares every risk, The snap of crossbow bolts, the sharp whistle of arrows, the frantic roar of startled sentries. You sense that this proximity binds her soldiers to her fate. When she leaps into the fray, they follow without question. Yet Rodigon's brilliance extends beyond open skirmishes. She understands that rebels cling to fortified positions, mud brick towers and earthen ramparts that promise safety. So she blends classical siegecraft with the unpredictability of guerrilla warfare. You watch at twilight, as she halts her column beyond sight of a rebel camp. Torches flicker along the parapet, a gentle glow masked by the gathering shadows. Her officers spread a thin line of archers behind low dunes, each camouflaged under woven reeds. At her signal, a single deliberate raise of her hand, arrows arc silently through the air, thudding into ramparts with a muted echo. As rebels scramble to respond, Rodigon's light cavalry circles around, clattering down poorly guarded gates. No drawn-out siege towers or cumbersome battering rams slow her pace. Instead, she employs swift sapping parties. Excavators undermine walls at midnight, collapsing sections with barely a whisper. When a breach finally yawns, she leads the charge through the opening, her sword flashing beneath the moon. Rebels, startled by this combination of subterfuge and frontal assault, falter in confusion. Few commanders achieve such balance. Rodigon's ability to shift seamlessly from pitched battle at dawn to furtive night forays sets her apart. One day, her troops press rebels in open fields. The next, they appear in the courtyard of the fortress itself, cutting supply lines at the root. Imagine yourself beside a smouldering campfire after one such triumph, the distant wreckage of the fallen camp glowing in embers. Rodigon walks among the wounded, her hand on each soldier's shoulder, dispensing quiet praise. She speaks in measured tones about tomorrow's march. Never rush, never outrage, only purpose. Through her tactical brilliance, she wove mobility and ritual sacrifice into a tapestry of victory. Her enemies never knew whether to expect a formal siege or a sudden strike at dusk, and in that uncertainty lay the heart of her genius. A reminder that true strength often lies not in sheer force, but in adaptability and the fearless example set by one determined leader. Long after the dust of battle settled, and the last rebel stronghold fell silent, Rodigon's presence refused to fade from the collective memory of Parthia and beyond. While grand chronicles of empire recorded few details of her deeds, her legend endured in the voices of bards and the murmurs of campfires. In marble-carved annals kept by royal scribes, Rodigon appears only in passing mention, an honourable footnote to her father's reign or a brief entry in lists of military engagements. Court historians, ever mindful of propriety, rarely lingered on the deeds of a woman in war. They preferred to frame victories in the light of male commanders, relegating Rodigon's role to that of dutiful daughter or symbolic figurehead. Yet beneath this official gloss, the people whispered a different story. In dusty hamlets along caravan routes, and in the tented camps of nomadic herders, bards sang of the princess who wore dust in her hair as courage like armor. Epic verses, improvised and passed down through generations, recounted her vow, her rush into battle, her cold gaze that could shatter enemy morale. Children learned her name in lullabies that painted her as a guardian spirit, driving away night terrors with tales of her spear gleaming under starlight. Folk tales filled in the gaps official pages omitted. How she outwitted rebel scouts by carving secret runes into her steed's hoofprints, or how she communed with ancestral spirits in hidden mountain caves to seek guidance before a crucial campaign. These narratives, though embroidered over time, shared a common thread. They portrayed Rodigon as both warrior and mystic, a leader whose resolve and resourcefulness transcended mere bloodlines. In a world where gender norms dictated women's roles as household managers and bearers of heirs, Rodigon's example resonated like a clarion call. Mothers told their daughters of her unwashed hair vow, not as a cautionary tale but as inspiration to embrace hardship when necessary. Girls fashioned makeshift spears from birch branches, staging mock sieges in courtyard sandpits. Some young women, inspired by her story, secretly trained in archery, their laughter echoing beneath trellised vines. Across Parthia's diverse landscapes, fertile river valleys, arid highlands and windswept steppes, Rodigon became a symbol of what women could achieve when unbound by restrictive expectations. Even among men, her legend carried an undercurrent of respect and admiration. Male soldiers who fought under her banners whispered of her calm presence before battle, and her willingness to share both victory and hardship. They carried tokens, braids of her discarded hair woven into their armor straps as talismans of courage. Over centuries, as empires rose and fell, new generations discovered her tale anew. Poets of the Sasanian court, adapted Parthian ballads into refined odes, celebrating her as a seminal heroine in Persian-influenced literature. By the time Arab historians recorded the annals of Eastern territories, Rodigon's name appeared alongside other great leaders, not as an anomaly, but as part of a tapestry of powerful figures who shaped their age. Imagine yourself in a remote village on the edge of the desert, hearing an elderly storyteller recite verses about Rodigon. Her voice quavers as she recounts the princess's vow, and you sense more than historical record. You sense a human longing to honor one who dared to defy limitations. Rodigon's blending of ritual hardship and tactical genius challenged the ancient world's gender norms, offering a different story of leadership, one not limited by birth or blood, but defined by courage, ingenuity, and unwavering resolve. Her legacy endures not in marble halls or dusty archives, but in the hearts and voices of those who sing her praises, reminding us that even a single life steadfast in purpose can echo across centuries. As you leave the swirling campfires of Parthia's plains and return your thoughts to Rome's crowded streets, consider the contrast between two worlds, one governed by the clang of steel in a massive amphitheatre, the other by the whisper of hooves across open grasslands. In Rome, order comes wrapped in laws and spectacles. In Rodigon's realm, it flows from symbolic sacrifice and the freedom of swift movement. Imagine yourself once more in the heart of Rome, standing beside marble columns polished smooth by countless hands. Here, a dense network of laws binds every citizen. Statutes codify what you may eat, where you may live, and how you may speak. Daily life unfolds under the watchful eyes of magistrates, public officials, and the ever-present vigiles. When unrest simmers, whether from hunger or political strife, the city's leaders summon grand distractions, gladiator games that echo with clashing steel, chariot races that blur horses into thunderous motion, grain doles that fill stomachs just enough to quell indignation. Bread and circuses are both placation and power, a reminder that authority resides in lavish displays backed by written decree. Yet this control depends on wealth and infrastructure. Towering forums and aqueducts, coin-filled purses, the steady hum of civic machinery. Discontent is managed in stadiums, debates in the Senate, and administrative bureaus staffed by countless clerks. The spectacle distracts, the statutes intimidate, and the labyrinth of laws ensures no one steps too far from the prescribed path. Now shift your gaze back to Rodigon's camp at dusk, where soldiers gather around smouldering embers. There, authority takes different form. It is woven into ritual hardship, an unwashed mane, bare feet upon rocky ground, sleepless nights beneath star-studded skies. Mobility is the lifeblood of Parthian society, a people who measure distance by the rhythm of horses' hooves rather than the length of statute pages. Rodigon's power stems not from decrees but from example. Each vow she fulfills, each hardship she embraces, inscribes her leadership directly onto the hearts of her followers. There are no grand amphitheatres here. There is only the vastness of the steppe, where a single rider can appear unannounced behind enemy lines, and a small band of archers can vanish into rolling fog before dawn. Imagine yourself straddling this divide. One hand grips the smooth marble rail of Rome's forum. The other rests lightly on the leather rein of a spirited steed. You sense the weight of 100 laws pressing down upon your shoulders, readings of civic codes tucked into every fold of your toga. Yet with one gentle tug, you feel the steed respond, eager to burst across open fields beyond any boundary line. In Rome, a lost coin could land you in the courts. In Rodigon's realm, a misplaced foot brings only bruises and a lesson in agility. In the city, crowds pulse like a heartbeat under law and spectacle. On the plains, solitude hums with possibility, and every sunrise invites movement. If you ever doubted the value of mobility over municipal ordinance, picture a runaway horse charging through Rome's tightly regulated streets, a thrilling breach of protocol, and a vivid demonstration that freedom, once tasted, can't be easily caged by statutes or showmanship. In this contrast lies a broader truth. Rome's grand cities testify to an empire built on structure and shared distraction, while Rodigon's campaigns remind us that unshackled resolve and strategic movement can topple walls and rewrite destinies. As you settle back, draw a slow breath, and carry with you the harmony of these opposing forces, the majesty of disciplined order, and the whispering power of untamed freedom. Imagine a boundless horizon where the golden steppe grass sways in concert with the wind, each blade gleaming like burnished metal under the sun's early light. At the heart of this living tapestry stands Tomius, queen of the Massagetae. Her stallion shifts its weight beneath her, flanks heaving, her cloak lined with wolf fur ripples behind her like dark smoke. In her hand she holds a finely wrought bow, its curve echoing the graceful arc of the sunrise. From across the plain, a small procession approaches. Cyrus's envoys, mounted on well-fed camels and bearing gifts for a royal bride-to-be. Their silken banners ripple, ornate and foreign, inscrutable as the ornate brocades sewn into their tunics. In delicate chests they carry Persian gold, gems that catch the light with every subtle movement, and a proclamation sealed in the imperial signet. They represent the mightiest empire of the age, an empire whose name alone commands both awe and dread. In the glittering courts of most ancient kingdoms, a royal marriage proposal unfolded with all the ceremony of a grand pageant. Trumpets would announce the arrival of envoys. Canopies of silk and gold would shade them from the sun's glare. Poets might compose verses in honor of the alliance, and court scribes would ready fine vellum for signatures and seals. Every moment was choreographed to convey the weight of dynastic unity, the fusion of two great houses under a single banner. But here on the open steppe, where no palace walls enclose the sky, Tomius answers not from a gilded throne, but from the raw expanse of grass and wind. When Cyrus's envoys arrive, camels laden with silken trappings and chests of Persian gold, they find no opulent audience chamber. Instead, they dismount on dew-slick earth and approach a ring of horsemen, whose breath steams in the cool morning air. There is no red carpet, no herald's call, only the whisper of breeze through tall grass and the distant murmur of herds. At the vanguard, the lead envoy bows low, offering a scroll sealed with the king's signet. The vellum glows in the dawn light, its edges gilded, promising wealth, shared dominion and prestige beyond imagining. Yet Tomius does not pause to admire the craftsmanship. She remains mounted, her posture composed, cloak draped casually over her saddle. Then, with measured grace, she dismounts, boots sinking slightly into the damp earth, stepping forward until the envoy's gifts lie at her feet. Her presence in that moment is a study in unyielding sovereignty. Cloaked in furs rather than brocade, she stands taller than any throne could make her, as if she has absorbed the sky itself into her bearing. The breeze catches her dark hair and flutters it across her shoulders, yet she does not brush it aside. In every loose strand there is a story of dawn patrols and dusk councils, of nights spent under open heavens and days riding the length of her domain. Her voice, clear as a mountain stream, carries across the short distance without effort. I am queen by blood and by steel. The words fall like stones dropped into still water, sending ripples through the gathering of envoys. She lifts her chin, eyes fixed on the Persian standard, a proud banner that had once seemed invincible. My people bow to no man's rule, not even to Cyrus, whose name echoes from Babylon to the mountains. A hush settles over the assembly. The youngest envoy staggers slightly, as though struck by an unseen force, the leather bracer on his wrist rattling in surprise. The older ambassadors exchange furtive glances, their polished boots shifting uneasily on the grass. Even the camels pause in their chewing, nostrils flaring, as though they too sense the moment's gravity. For a heartbeat, the steppe itself seems to hold its breath. Then, without breaking her calm, Tomius steps forward. Her shadow falls across the envoy's outstretched hands, eclipsing both scroll and standard. Return with this answer, she commands, voice low but carrying the weight of authority, and ask not for our hand when you have not yet tamed our spirit. With that final decree, she turns on her heel and strides away, each footstep imprinting her resolve into the soil. The envoys are left to gather their gifts, now tarnished by rejection, and to retrace their journey to Cyrus with news that no empire, however mighty, can bend an unbroken people. In that decisive act, Tomius reaffirmed not only her own sovereignty, but the unassailable freedom of the Massagetae, etched forever into the annals of steppe legend. On the boundless steppe, where no walls contain the horizon and the sky stretches in unbroken arcs, Tomius wields authority not through gilded decrees but through swift councils and living alliances. Her diplomacy unfolds beneath open heavens, where tribal chiefs, envoys and warrior elders convene in circles of trust. Each meeting is a performance of respect and resolve, reminders that on these plains power is earned by presence and proven by action. Imagine the first light of dawn painting the grass in shades of gold, as horsemen from allied clans arrive from 4 directions. They rein in their mounts at a designated clearing, no stone forum to mark the site, only the earth's humble slope. In the center, Tomius sits astride her black stallion, cloak snapped by the wind. Around her, a ring of riders dismounts, forming an open-air senate where word and gesture carry the weight of written treaties. There are no lengthy debates or secret committees. When pastoral laws change or a new pasture must be shared, Tomius calls a council that begins at sunrise and ends by midday's peak. The chief speaks, perhaps a Sarmatian leader seeking passage for seasonal herds. Tomius listens, nodding, eyes narrowing as she calculates the impact on her own people. She questions each proposal directly, her voice low but imperious, never raised, for silence commands attention on the steppe. When Cyrus's threat loomed, she convened an emergency assembly at the Noctar Pass. Within minutes of her signal, over 1,000 horse archers and allied scouts gathered. There was no need for edicts sent weeks in advance. In a culture attuned to the rhythms of migration and maneuver, messengers carried word by sundown, and loyalty arrived on swift hooves before dawn. In these councils, consensus is reached through ministrations of honor rather than quill and ink. Tomius might invoke a story of ancestors who shared water in dire drought, or a vow made under a full moon to defend collective liberty. These symbolic references bind alliances as tightly as any signed treaty. Chiefs pledge their support with shared cups of kumis, eyes meeting hers in a moment of unspoken understanding. A simple clasp of arms, grasping shoulder and forearm, seals decisions more firmly than seals of wax. In the 1950s and 60s, anti-colonial leaders across Africa and Asia seized on Tomius's defiance as a model for newly mobilized peoples. In Egypt, during discussions over Suez and sovereignty, intellectuals likened Gamal Abdel Nasser's stand against external pressures to Tomius's refusal of Cyrus's marriage. Pamphlets circulated with excerpts from Herodotus juxtaposed against modern manifestos, drawing a direct line from the steppe's freedom to the mid-century struggle for self-determination. Today, Tomius appears in unexpected places. Graphic novels in Tehran and animated shorts on YouTube channels dedicated to ancient women's history. Feminist scholars reclaim her from the male-dominated chronicles, emphasizing her diplomatic acumen and collective leadership rather than focusing solely on combat. At conferences, panels dissect the nuances of her story, how a nomadic queen's cautious counsels can inform modern governance, or how her landscape-based tactics resonate with contemporary guerrilla strategies. In each revival, Tomius's legend is reshaped to address the anxieties of the age, from imperial subjugation to colonial liberation to gender equality. Yet the core remains unchanged. A leader who refused to yield, who leveraged local strengths against distant powers, and whose silhouette against the steppe horizon still stands for autonomy and courage. As you contemplate her many resurrections, you sense that the truest legacy lies not in the historical details, but in the enduring need for stories that remind us. Defiance can ripple across millennia, igniting hope in every era that dares to resist. As the sun dips below the horizon of the steppe, gentle shadows stretch across stalks of golden grass, and the distant rumble of hooves fades into the whisper of night winds. In this tranquil moment, consider the clash between two worlds so different they might seem to inhabit separate realms, the sprawling stone capitals of ancient empires and the unbounded grasslands ruled by nomadic peoples. Through the story of Tomius, queen of the Massagetae, we glimpse a profound truth: peripheral, non-urban cultures have the power to unsettle even the grandest centers of civilization. Imagine the heart of Persia or Rome, a vast plaza framed by marble colonnades, each column carved with scenes of conquest and divine favor. You stand amid traders hawking silks and spices, the scent of incense drifting from temple courtyards. In the distance, triumphal arches soar, celebrating victories on distant frontiers. Here, power is visible in every stone, roads radiating like spokes from a central hub, linking distant provinces to the emperor's capital, aqueducts channeling water into opulent palaces and public baths, granaries brimming with grain to feed masses, ensuring that bread and spectacle keep the populace content. Within this structured environment, authority is exercised through complex layers of bureaucracy. Governors in satellite cities send regular reports. Tax collectors record each denarius flowing into the treasury. Scribes copy laws in neat columns on papyrus. A citizen learns early that survival and success shift in step with adherence to the law and favor of those in power. Traders rely on safe passage along well-guarded roads. Soldiers march in orderly legions with standardized training. Courtiers perfect the art of flattery and intrigue within palace walls. The very landscape of the imperial hub dictates a mindset. Here, permanence is prized, order enforced, and dissent contained. The empire's rulers understand that law alone cannot hold a vast population in line. Hence they stage grand spectacles, gladiatorial games, chariot races, lavish festivals, to reinforce unity through shared distraction. Spectators cheer beneath the weight of marble arches, their eyes dazzled by spectacle, while the realities of grain shortages or political tensions recede into the background. Official narratives inscribed on monuments and recited by court orators cast the emperor as a divinely favored steward, his conquests justified by manifest destiny. Now, shift your gaze to the steppe itself. No towering columns interrupt the skyline here, no network of roads. Instead, you see a living mosaic of grasses and reeds, stretching unbroken to the far-off mountains, where the sky hangs low and vivid. This is land untamed by stone or statute, shaped instead by winds, waterways, and the migrations of herds. In this environment, mobility is not an option. It is the essence of survival. A nomad's home is the yurt or tent, easily pitched and dismantled. Food comes from herds of horses, sheep, or goats that follow grazing cycles. Water is sought wherever the land reveals a spring or river. Social structures are fluid. Leadership arises from personal merit and proven skill. Councils meet beneath open skies, decisions made by consensus or persuasive demonstration of wisdom, rather than by decree. There is no central archive or palace. Knowledge passes in stories, songs, and shared experience. In nomadic societies, individual autonomy and collective solidarity coexist in an uneasy harmony. Each tribe or clan values its independence, yet understands that unity in the face of external threats is vital. Alliances are made through marriages, shared vows at council fires, or cooperative raids. Hospitality is sacred. A guest receives protection without question, and trust is built through personal bonds rather than legal contracts. To the nomad, the concept of a distant emperor's authority is abstract, like a rumor carried on the wind. Taxes in coins? They know only tribute in livestock or shared spoils. Written edicts? They trust a warrior's oath more than parchment sealed with wax. The periphery thrives on adaptability, valuing traits such as speed, resilience, and intimate knowledge of terrain, qualities often at odds with the methods of settled empires. Enter Tomius, queen of the Massagetae. Her people occupy the grasslands where no roads lead, no garrisons stand, and no city gates confine the sunlit sky. When Cyrus the Great's envoys arrive bearing marriage proposals and imperial gold, they expect the trappings of diplomatic protocol, pomp, ceremony, protocol. Instead, they find Tomius dismounted on dew-damp grass, boots unpolished, cloak of wolf fur instead of velvet. Her refusal of Cyrus's offer, a refusal echoed in a flat declaration that my people bow to no man's rule, shakes the very foundations of imperial assumption. Tomius's approach to alliances and conflict illustrates the nomadic model in action. She convenes councils at dawn, decisions rendered by the rising sun rather than by the stroke of quill. Chiefs arrive on swift horses, pledging support with shared cups of kummies and solemn vows beneath the open sky. Evoking ancestral covenants, she binds allies not through written treaties but through performances of trust, shared hardships, joint hunts, and joint vows before the spirits of land and herd. When war arrives, her mastery of terrain turns marshes and river fords into deadly traps. Persian infantry, trained for open battlefields and siege warfare, find themselves bogged down in mud-choked channels, their discipline unraveling under the weight of mire and arrow flight. Light cavalry strikes, then retreats before heavy infantry can respond, leaving behind confusion and fractured formations, ideal for settlement-based armies but lethal for mobile tribes. These tactics showcase how peripheral powers can exploit their intimate knowledge of landscape against a centralized foe. Beyond battlefield tactics, the very presence of nomadic horse archers unhorses settled rulers psychologically. An emperor accustomed to legions moving in lockstep along paved roads must now grapple with an enemy as elusive as the wind. Each dawn brings uncertainty. Will the next arrow rain down at dawn's glow, or will the main camp awaken to find its scouts cut off? This unpredictability sows doubt not only among soldiers, but within council chambers far from the front itself. Nomadic raids on trade caravans and frontier settlements strike at the economic arteries of empires. Silk, spices, grain, goods that flow along roads maintained by imperial power are vulnerable to swift raids, causing shortages in distant cities and undermining the empire's narrative of unassailable control. Border governors, far from the imperial capital, bear the brunt of these disruptions, unable to call on reinforcements fast enough to secure lanes stretching hundreds of miles. Yet the relationship between hub and periphery is not purely adversarial. Wherever nomads and settled peoples interact, cultural exchange follows. Horse riding techniques, composite bows, and mobile warfare strategies adopted by empires often trace their origins to steppe tribes. Conversely, nomadic elites may adopt aspects of urban culture, luxury textiles, administrative practices, even elements of religion, blending them with local customs. Over time, the frontier becomes a crucible where new hybrid traditions and technologies emerge, enriching both sides. In our modern world, parallels arise whenever centralized authority confronts agile, decentralized actors. whether in asymmetric warfare, cyber conflicts, or grassroots political movements. The steps lesson preserved through Tomius's story is that flexibility and intimate knowledge of environment can offset overwhelming material power. A small, mobile force, deeply rooted in local networks and adaptive strategies, can challenge the expectations and infrastructures of a sprawling empire. Tomius's alliances crisscross the northern reaches, nomadic Sarmatians, fierce Dahai, and scattered Scythian clans. Each group respects her because she respects them, never imposing dictates but negotiating terms that honor each tribe's autonomy. If a clan requests refuge from raiding bands, she offers sanctuary in exchange for scouts who map enemy movements. If another seeks trade routes to China, she guarantees safe passage through her territories, ensuring goods flow in return for loyalty. These flexible pacts ensure that when Persian envoys arrive with silken gifts, they find not a fractured confederacy, but a united front. In Tomius's hands, diplomacy becomes a living, breathing tapestry of shared interests, not a static parchment locked away. Picture yourself at one such council's close, the noonday sun casting long horse shadows across the grass. Tomius raises her hand, a silent cue, and the camp breaks. Allies mount their steeds, exchanges of provisions and scouts maps are made, and within an hour, columns form and ride away, each contingent carrying the same message that this land belongs to those who guard it together. In these moments of nomadic diplomacy, you sense the true source of her power, an unshakable bond with her people and their peers, forged through open councils and sealed by the trust of horses and hearts. There are no palace walls here, only the freedom to speak, to pledge and to ride into whatever dawn awaits. Imagine the vast rolling plains stretching to the horizon, the grass rippling like a sea under the breeze. In that seemingly empty expanse, you stand poised at the edge of a subtle rise, heart steady, eyes narrowed against the morning light. Far off, the heavy glint of Persian armor marks the approach of an invading force, disciplined infantry in rigid formations, marching in step to the beat of imperial drums. Into this scene rides Tomius's answer, a swirling host of horse archers, lean steeds snorting in anticipation, their riders cloaked in leather and fur, bows strung taut and ready. Before the Persians can tighten their lines, you hear it, a soft murmur rising across the plain. It's the collective breathing of hundreds of horses, the muted thump of hooves on packed earth, and the rustle of capes slipping through blades of grass. The horse archers fan out in a loose crescent, each rider mindful of spacing. Too close, and they risk tripping hooves; too far, and their arrows lose the strength of massed volleys. At Tomius's signal, a single raised hand or the subtle shift of her steed, the wave breaks. Riders surge forward, bows raised in unison, and the steppe air crackles with the hiss of arrows in flight. Each shot is measured for maximum effect, aimed at exposed limbs, helmets, the unarmored spaces between currach plates. The Persian lines shudder as arrows find victims before the enemy can even lift their shields. There is no drumbeat here, only the fluid rhythm of attack and withdrawal. No attempt is made to hold ground. Instead, the horse archers wheel away the moment they have loosed their arrows, slipping back beyond the reach of javelins and spear thrusts. You sense the Persians' frustration as they pivot, shields first, seeking to bring their heavier weapons to bear, only to find empty air and the distant glitter of heels racing away. The horse archers vanish as swiftly as they appeared, leaving gaps in the enemy's formation and sowing confusion. Some Persian commanders, driven by pride or miscalculation, order pursuit. But the steed-born warriors know the land's secrets. They lure the foot soldiers toward marshy hollows or stony gullies. Once the infantry are mired in mud or stumbling over rocks, the horse archers re-emerge from their concealment. A sudden flash of bowstrings drawn, a volley of arrows arcing into immobilized ranks. The effect is devastating. Men slowed by terrain become targets in an ambush too precise for broad formations to repel. In this dance of shadows and hoofbeats, you appreciate the true art of nomadic warfare. Each strike is surgical, designed not to conquer territory immediately, but to erode the enemy's will. Day after day, the horse archers harry supply lines, cut off isolated patrols, and vanish before reinforcements can arrive. Persian soldiers grow wary, their advanced echelons reluctant to move beyond safe ground, their progress slowed to a crawl by the constant invisible threat at their heels. When engagement becomes too risky, if the Persians muster chariots or form testudo formations, the horse archers withdraw entirely. They recross the steppe's invisible boundary, melding into distant horizons. Yet their presence lingers like a ghost, a psychological weight on the invaders' minds. Each dawn brings the same question: where and when will the next arrow strike? Picture the plain after one such skirmish. hoofprints crisscrossing the grass, arrows abandoned where they struck or missed, and a silence heavier than before. Tomius's riders regroup, laughter soft amid the whispering grass, retelling moments of deft maneuvers and narrow escapes. Their strategy is not brute force, but a harmonious blend of speed, precision, and intimate knowledge of the land, a reminder that in the boundless steppe, true power belongs to those who move unseen, strike quickly and disappear like wind. With the collapse of empires after World War I and the redrawing of borders, new nations turned to antiquity for legitimizing myths. In Persia's post-Qajar era, leaders sought heroes who predated Arab conquest, figures untainted by later sectarian divisions. Tomius, as a champion of indigenous autonomy, was resurrected in school textbooks alongside Cyrus himself, paradoxically reuniting conqueror and conqueror in the service of national pride. Textiles and ceramics bore her likeness. A warrior queen framed by stylized horses, her bow pointed skyward. Public statues erected in regional museums portrayed her more as a regal embodiment of Persian spirit than a steppe nomad. But her message remained clear: resistance before submission. Picture the Persian army's heavy boots trudging across the open steppe, shields clanking in rigid harmony. Their disciplined columns progress steadily, confident that nothing here can stop their advance. But beneath those well-worn soles lie marshes, hidden quagmires and braided river channels that course like veins through the grasslands. For Tomius and her Massagetae warriors, this landscape is not an obstacle, but a carefully cultivated weapon. As dawn's mist clings to dew-slick reeds, Tomius scouts a likely ford in the distant river where crossing seems most straightforward to the untrained eye. She dismounts and presses her fingers against damp grass, feeling the subtle give that betrays hidden mud. With a quiet nod, she sends word to her captains: prepare the trap. Under cover of pre-dawn shadows, small detachments fan out along the prospective crossing. Armed with long poles, they prod the riverbed at intervals, mapping the shallows and the sinking depths, then quietly mark the treacherous spots with slender reeds notched to warn those who know the code. Their horses tread lightly, hooves barely sinking, as they practice leading the animals through the safest paths. By mid-morning, when the Persians approach, the river glitters in the sun. Its surface deceptively calm, the invaders form up, expecting easy passage where scouts have reported gentle currents. The first ranks step in with assured strides, sandals slipping onto firm gravel. The second division follows in lockstep, shields raised, confident that nothing here could match their ironclad discipline. Then the order comes from Tomius: hold fire. From the river's edge, her horse archers observe as the Persian centre steps onto a patch of marsh disguised by reeds. Before the infantry can adjust, the ground gives way in a sucking embrace. Sand turns to mud, mud to slush, and men feel themselves pulled down. Shouts of alarm echo through the formation as shields drag, weapons clatter from frozen grips, and once proud soldiers sink up to their knees, then waists. At that signal, Tomius's archers rise from concealment. Arrows ripple through the air, striking off helms and armor plates. The Persian lines, once cohesive, unravel in confusion. Some soldiers attempt to pivot, only to find their feet mired in stinking mire. Others plunge forward into deeper water, abandoning shields that float away, leaving them exposed. As panic sets in, a second trap springs on the army's flank. A minor tributary thought to be a harmless stream swells near its confluence, fed by upstream springs. Tomius led engineers to dam its source days before. Now, with a single breach, a rush of cold water surges downstream, swelling the channel. Cavalry horses slip on sudden currents. Infantry shields bob helplessly. From higher ground, Massagetae horse archers harry these stranded units, their hooves kicking up sun-warmed steam as they gallop the swollen banks. Each volley of arrows pushes the disoriented Persians deeper into water and mud, until the very ground they stand on becomes enemy. By noon, the river crossings have become scenes of dismay. Discarded spears, inverted shields drifting downstream, and clusters of soldiers clutching at reeds in a desperate search for firm earth. Outside the traps, Tomius holds back her cavalry, content to let the terrain and her archers carry the day. Only when the Persian ranks have collapsed into rout does she signal the final advance, a swift, disciplined descent that seals the ambush. Imagine the aftermath: reeds whisper in a gentle breeze, horses sip quietly at widened channels, and the steppe returns to its serene rhythm. Tomius rides along the water's edge, noting slender notched reeds marking safe paths. She pauses, letting the gurgle of water and the soft stir of grass soothe the mind. In this landscape mastery, turning marsh and river into allies, She demonstrated that true power need not come from overwhelming force, but from an intimate understanding of the land and the patience to let it work its silent magic. In the flickering twilight of antiquity, where oral tradition and written memory intertwine, the story of Queen Tomius and Cyrus the Great emerges as a tapestry woven from both fact and legend. Our principal source is Herodotus of Halicarnassus, the father of history, whose histories offer a vivid, if sometimes contradictory, portrait of these momentous events. Herodotus begins his tale with a simple question. How did Cyrus, renowned conqueror of Lydia, Babylon and Media, meet his end at the hands of the Massagetae? As his informants tell it, after stripping outlying villages bare and outraging nomadic tribes with tales of forced marriage, Cyrus pressed deeper into the steppe in search of Tomius, his health. He trusted in his usual stratagems, diplomacy first, then force, and expected the Massagetae to bend before his might. Yet Herodotus admits that reports vary. In one version, Cyrus's army becomes ensnared in marshy ground near the Araxes River. Thrust into waist-deep water, his soldiers flounder, their spears and shields hampered by mud. It is here, amid choking reeds and swirling currents, that Cyrus falls in mortal combat. Some say he was struck by a stray arrow loosed by a hidden Massagetae horse archer. Others claim he was dragged underwater by armor too heavy to escape the soft silt. Either way, his fall is sudden, an ordinary man felled by the extraordinary cunning of landscape and foe. But Herodotus then offers another, more dramatic account, one that speaks to the power of myth to embellish history. In this telling, Tomius herself confronts Cyrus beneath her banner. According to this version, she rides out at dawn, bow in hand, and confronts the Persian king face to face. Stripped of his regal trappings and armor, Cyrus meets her challenge in single combat. With a decisive blow, or a perfectly aimed arrow, Tomius executes him on the battlefield. She then raises his severed head as a trophy, a potent symbol of her people's indomitable will. Herodotus does not endorse either story definitively. He lays both before his readers, acknowledging that truth often resides between extremes. He marvels at the idea of a queen slaying the greatest king of the age, yet he also respects the more prosaic account of battlefield mishap, a testament to the perils of overweening pride in unfamiliar territory. What emerges from these dual narratives is an image of history as living dialogue. Was Cyrus felled by terrain and tactical surprise, or by Tomius's personal hand? The historian's duty, Herodotus suggests, is to preserve every whisper of truth, every glimmer of legend, and trust that future generations will discern the essence. In the gentle hush of reflection, you might find comfort in the ambiguity. After all, the greatest legacies often blend fact and myth so seamlessly that each enriches the other. Whether history records Cyrus's fall as the result of strategic misstep or a queen's singular courage, both accounts converge on the same truth. Tomius's resistance reshaped the course of empires, and her story, like all enduring stories, lives on in the space between certainty and wonder. Imagine yourself once more on the plains at dusk. The sky painted in soft shades of crimson and gold. Tomius's riders gather at the edge of a tranquil river, their horses drinking at the bank. There is no clang of steel, no echoing trumpet, only the hum of insects, the murmur of flowing water, and the low murmur of voices recounting the day's deeds. In this serene moment, you feel the true harmony of center and periphery, the solid marvels of empire, and the living breath of nomadic freedom. Both worlds hold wisdom. The hubs teach us about organization, infrastructure, and collective spectacle. The peripheries remind us of the power of adaptability, intimate knowledge, and the unbridled spirit of autonomy. Together, they form a balanced tapestry of human experience, woven across time and terrain. As you draw a deep breath, exhale slowly. Let the steppe's quiet strength infuse your thoughts, and carry with you the enduring lesson that true resilience often lies at the edges, where freedom meets the sweep of history. Imagine the heat of an early morning sun, shimmering over the Nile's broad waters, palm fronds rustling in a gentle breeze. Along the riverbank, Egyptian beekeepers prepare their apiaries, portable hives fashioned from cylindrical baskets of woven wicker, each bound with reeds and coated with clay to keep out moisture. The hives stand in neat rows, their entrances mere slits in the side, alive with the soft drone of thousands of bees stirring to their day's work. In the ancient Egyptian worldview, bees were more than simple insects. They were born of the tears of Ra, the sun god, and carried a fragment of his divine light. Each morning, as the sun ascended the sky, temple priests gathered fresh honey to offer in incense-fumed chambers. The amber liquid gleamed like captured sunlight, filling alabaster bowls and lacquered jars that lined the walls of sanctuaries. Worshippers believed that Ra's blessing flowed through every drop, carrying prayers heavenward with the same golden radiance. Unlike the fixed rock cavities used in later centuries, Egyptian hives were mobile. Beekeepers could move them seasonally, following flowering acacia groves or date palms as they came into bloom. This mobility allowed the bees continuous access to nectar, ensuring a steady supply of honey. During the harvest, the beekeeper donned a simple linen veil and approached the hives with measured calm, lighting smouldering bundles of sweet-smelling herbs like frankincense and myrrh to pacify the colony. Smoke drifted upward in curling tendrils, gently coaxing bees inward so combs could be removed intact. With practiced hands, the beekeeper would extract frames of wax-laden cells, brushing away stragglers before slicing open the comb. Honey streamed out in viscous ribbons, pooling into shallow bowls. Some comb was reserved for temple offerings. Other portions were mixed with beer to create mead, a potent libation served during festival days. At dawn, priests carried vessels of honey into the inner sanctum, placing them on alabaster altars before statues of Ra and other deities. The sweet aroma mingled with incense smoke, a heady perfume that lingered long after the rituals ended. Honey's transformative power, turning from solid comb to liquid gold, mirrored religious themes of rebirth and renewal. Offerings were accompanied by hymns praising Ra's daily victory over darkness, honey symbolizing the god's enduring light. Beyond its sacred role, honey served as a potent remedy in the Egyptian pharmacopoeia. Physicians mixed it with ground lotus petals and natron clay to create healing poultices for wounds, trusting honey's natural antiseptic properties to cleanse and soothe. A sticky salve of honey and resin protected skin from desert heat and insect bites, while a blend of honey, pomegranate rind, and myrrh treated persistent coughs and sore throats. As you picture these portable hives lining the fertile Nile banks, the hum of bees becomes a soft chorale underscoring daily life. The taste of honey drips on your tongue, warm, lightly floral, with an undercurrent of date blossom. The scent of burning myrrh curls in the air, calming your breath. In these divine bees of Ra, temple and home alike found both spiritual balm and practical cure, weaving a symphony of sweetness into the very fabric of ancient Mesopotamian and Egyptian civilization. In the bustling markets of ancient Babylon, the sweetness of honey was prized as both a daily luxury and an economic staple. Beyond its use in cuisine and medicine, honey's value was recognized by the state, which instituted laws to protect apiaries and regulate honey as a taxable good. Imagine the dusty lanes of Babylon, where merchants display copper pots heaped with golden comb, and travelers barter grains for jars of honey thick as syrup. Apiaries, often located on the outskirts of the city, were guarded zealously, for a single hive could produce dozens of amphorae of honey each season. The Code of Hammurabi, one of the earliest and most comprehensive legal collections, addresses this directly. Under Law 253, if a man steals an apiary, he shall be put to death. If he breaks into an apiary, he shall pay 10 shekels of silver to its owner. Such harsh penalties underscored honey's importance. A stolen hive deprived its owner not only of immediate income, but of future harvests, since the loss of a colony meant months before a new hive could be established. Beyond financial loss, theft disrupted local food supplies and temple offerings. Honey was essential in religious rites to gods like Marduk and Ishtar. By imposing severe fines and in some cases capital punishment, Babylonian law aimed to deter would-be thieves and ensure the security of both private and temple apiaries. The state did more than punish theft. It integrated honey into its tax system. Each harvest season, beekeepers were required to deliver a portion of their yield to the local governor. Rabo, the provincial tax collector, recorded these consignments in clay tablets. Year of Hammurabi, month Arach Samna, received 10 ban of honey from the apiary of Shamshiukin. Over time, these tablets preserved a detailed ledger of production volumes, regional variations, and seasonal fluctuations. Honey taxes served multiple purposes. They provided revenue for infrastructure projects, canal maintenance, city walls, palace construction, and funded the distribution of grain during lean years. Because honey was durable and easily stored, it functioned as a form of state wealth. In years of plenty, surplus honey could be sold or traded with neighboring regions for olive oil, wine, or precious metals, bolstering Babylon's economy. Temples, as major landholders and patrons of agriculture, also managed their own apiaries. Temple honey was often exempt from ordinary taxes, but required special tithes for large festivals. Priests oversaw these sacred hives, ensuring that offerings remained plentiful for rituals honoring deities who symbolized fertility and renewal. The Temple of Esagila, Babylon, maintained extensive records detailing honey brought as votive gifts, further emphasizing the commodity's dual role in religion and governance. As you picture the clay tablet ledgers and the buzz of bees around clay-lined hives, You sense the care with which Babylonian society governed this liquid gold. The promise of harsh punishment for theft and the integration of honey into tax registers reflect a civilization that understood both the fragility of apiaries and the sweetness of order. In Babylon, the law protected the humble hive as fiercely as it enforced the grandest royal decrees, acknowledging that even the mead-sweet glimmer of honey can shape the course of empire. Across the sun-drenched hills of ancient Greece and the fertile valleys of Anatolia, beekeepers refined the art of apiary management by introducing truly portable hives. Unlike the fixed wicker baskets of earlier Egypt, these designs placed control of the colony in the hands of the beekeeper, allowing hives to be moved with the seasons and follow the flowering cycles that dictated nectar flow. Imagine a gentle spring breeze stirring the air as a beekeeper inspects his row of clay cylinders, each about 2 feet tall and a foot in diameter. Crafted from local terracotta, these hollow vessels are sealed at one end and fitted with a small entrance slit near the base. Their smooth exteriors bear faint fingerprint curves where artisans shaped the clay, and each cylinder sits on a low stone plinth to keep out moisture and marauding ants. When the almond and olive trees blossom in early spring, the beekeeper harnesses oxen to a simple wooden sledge. With calm precision, he tips the cylinders onto soft ropes, securing them to the flatbed. The bees, lulled by the gentle vibration of travel and the mild smoke used to pacify them, remain tucked inside their clay homes. As the caravan moves from grove to grove through thyme-scented hillsides and along terraces carpeted with wildflowers, the hives accompany, ensuring that each colony accesses the freshest nectar sources. By midsummer, however, the blooms shift toward cooler elevations or river valleys. Here, Anatolian beekeepers pioneered another innovation: stacked wooden boxes, each box roughly the size of a large bread chest and fitted with a narrow gap for bee passage. Several boxes locked together like modular drawers, allowing the hive's population to expand vertically as the colony grows. Extra boxes can be added in those bountiful months, giving bees room for more comb. These box hives are equally portable. Teams of villagers gather at dawn, lifting the stacked units onto carts drawn by donkeys. The rhythmic creak of cartwheels mingles with the soft hum of bees contained within, and women in light linen veils walk alongside, carrying bowls of freshly mixed clay to patch any cracks before the journey. Midday heat is tempered by shading palm fronds draped over the load, and the procession travels slowly to avoid startling the bees. Once at the new site, perhaps a lavender-scented plateau or a riverbank lush with wild clover, the beekeeper arranges the cylinders or boxes in alignment, entrances facing the prevailing wind. He brushes a thin coat of propolis along each seam to reinforce the seal, then lights a small handful of dried shea leaves to calm anxious workers before lifting the lids. The bees emerge in a steady stream, adjusting swiftly to their new surroundings and resuming their foraging flights within minutes. These movable hives brought several advantages: improved honey yields by matching colonies to peak flowering periods, healthier bees, as seasonal relocation helped reduce disease buildup, and more predictable harvest schedules, allowing for planned temple offerings and market sales. The innovations also fostered a deeper bond between humans and hives, a collaboration requiring trust, timing, and a gentle hand. As you envision those clay cylinders and stacked boxes gliding across ancient landscapes, sense the subtle coordination between beekeepers and bees. Feel the warmth of the sun on sun-baked clay, the earthy aroma of freshly turned soil at each new apiary, and the quiet satisfaction as bees pour forth from their portable homes to gather nectar under the watchful eye of those who understood that, in the world of ancient apiculture, mobility was the key to sweetness. In the sunlit groves of Stagira, and along the pebble-strewn bays of the Aegean, Aristotle, the great philosopher and naturalist, turned his keen mind to the curious lives of bees. Long before the microscopes of later centuries, he conducted systematic observations of hives, recording behaviors that would lay the groundwork for ethology and social biology. Picture Aristotle seated on a weathered stone bench, scroll in hand, as he watches a swarm of bees departing their hive at dawn. He notes the precise angles at which they ascend, the steady hum of wings beating in near-perfect synchrony. He records the sequence. First a group emerges, scouts unerringly locate flowering plants, then workers follow in uniform flights. Such empirical attention to detail was revolutionary, departing from fanciful myths about spontaneous generation in favor of careful field notes. Among Aristotle's most remarkable insights was his recognition that bees communicated information about food sources to their nestmates. Though he lacked modern terms, he described a moving ritual within the hive. Certain bees would dance atop comb surfaces, their bodies trembling in measured patterns. These dancing bees, as Aristotle called them, seemed to inform others of the direction and distance of blossoms, an early precursor to what would later be known as the waggle dance. He wrote that some bees, upon returning laden with nectar, perform an elaborate movement that guides the unladen to where the sweetest flowers await. This was not idle speculation. Aristotle tested his theory by observing hives placed at varying distances from foraging grounds and noting correlations between dance vigor and forage distance. Aristotle also distinguished different roles within the bee community. He identified workers, smaller bees responsible for foraging and hive maintenance, and described larger king bees, though he mistakenly believed them male rulers. His description of a singular, more robust king presaged later corrections when researchers discovered the true queen's role. Nonetheless, Aristotle's delineation of internal hive hierarchy marked a significant leap, the concept that insect societies possessed specialized castes, rather than being amorphous swarms. He observed that worker bees constructed comb cells, deposited honey, and cared for young, acting in concert without explicit orders. This cooperative labor suggested a collective intelligence, a single soul animating many bodies, he mused, marveling at the unity of purpose underpinning hive life. What set Aristotle apart was not just what he observed, but how he recorded it. In his treatise History of Animals, he cross-referenced behaviors across species, bees, ants, and wasps, seeking common principles of social organization. His comparative approach laid the foundation for later taxonomy and ethological studies. Students and scholars flocked to hear his lectures in the Lyceum's shaded peristyle, where Aristotle recited passages about bee hierarchies and communications. His notes, copied onto papyrus scrolls, spread throughout the Hellenistic world, influencing physicians who used honey for medicinal salves, and philosophers who saw in the hive a model of political order. As you envision Aristotle's fieldwork, the tactile feel of sun-warmed comb, the soft rustle of wings against gentle zephyrs, appreciate the origins of our understanding. His careful notations, made without the aid of lenses, remind us that science begins with attentive observation and patient curiosity. In the silent choreography of bees, Aristotle found lessons about unity, communication, and the harmony of natural law, insights as sweet and enduring as honey itself. By the 1st century CE, Roman apiculture had evolved from rustic art into a precise agricultural science, meticulously chronicled by naturalists like Pliny the Elder. In his Encyclopedic Naturalis Historia, Pliny dedicated extensive passages to the design, placement, and management of hives, reflecting a civilization intent on extracting maximum yield with minimal loss. Beyond its culinary and medical uses, honey held profound symbolic weight in the Roman legal system. Courtroom oaths, known as ousumo andum, invoked deities and substances emblematic of truth. Pledging one's honesty over a cup of honey was akin to promising a testimony as pure and unadulterated as the liquid gold itself. In certain trials, particularly those involving land disputes or inheritance claims, litigants swore upon altar steps, their right hands dipped in honey before touching a sacred blade of laurel. The belief was that any falsehood would incur divine wrath, turning the sweet honey bitter on the lips of the perjurer. Provincial governors sometimes required oaths sealed with honey, dipped in consecrated water, underscoring the community's trust in both civic and cosmic order. Picture yourself tasting a small spoonful of honey. As you review these traditions, a warmth spreading across your palate, its sweetness lingering like a promise. In ancient Rome, that very promise carried weight in kitchens, clinics, and courthouses alike. Honey's unique chemistry made it a natural healer, its symbolic purity made it a moral touchstone, and through both functions, this simple substance transcended its humble origins, becoming a golden thread that bound together the domains of food, health, and justice. Bees have captivated human imagination for millennia, not just for the golden sweetness they produce, but for what they represent, a living symbol of order, cooperation, and a sacred link between the earthly and the divine. From the temples of Egypt to modern boardrooms and environmental movements, the humble bee's metaphorical resonance has endured and evolved across cultures and epochs. In the earliest civilizations, observers marveled at the organized complexity of the hive. Egyptian temple carvings depict bees as emissaries of Ra, born from the sun god's tears. Their orderly columns of comb, geometric in precision, embodied Ma'ta, the principle of cosmic balance and truth. Priests taught that just as each bee worked for the common good, so too should citizens uphold social harmony. In Mesopotamia, Babylonian law treated apiaries as extensions of communal order. Thieves faced steep fines or execution for disrupting the carefully arranged system of hives, and temple offerings of honey underscored the substance's sanctity. The Assyrian king Ashurbanipal referred to bees as little scribes, noting that each cell in the comb resembled the precise strokes of a cuneiform tablet, further linking the hive's craftsmanship to the codified structures of civilization. Greek philosophers took these observations a step further. Aristotle's early ethological studies detailing the dance by which bees communicated nectar sources hinted at a form of participatory governance. Plato, in his dialogue Statesman, imagined the philosopher king as a beekeeper, tending the state as one tends the hive, guiding but not dictating every detail, recognizing that too rigid a rule can stifle the collective wisdom embedded in organized cooperation. The Romans, inheritors of Greek thought and masters of administration, wove bee symbolism into law and medicine. In Naturalis Historia, Pliny the Elder praised bees as paragons of industriousness. Roman jurists likened the hive's legal protections, stern penalties for hive theft, and regulated honey taxes to the strictures that upheld the empire's stability. Public monuments sometimes featured reliefs of bees clustered around a central cell, representing the emperor and senate surrounded by loyal citizens. The phrase "collecta sicut apes, gathered like bees," appeared in speeches to rally populations for public works or military campaigns. Even the imperial use of honey in religious ceremonies underscored a belief that the state itself was a living, breathing organism, sustained by the diligent labor of each person, much like the hive depends on every bee. In medieval Europe, Christian allegories drew on bee imagery to communicate spiritual lessons. Monastic codes likened monks to bees, living communally in disciplined silence, sharing the fruits of labor in honeyed devotion. The Gothic cathedrals of France bore bee emblems, and illuminated manuscripts featured bees hovering around divine figures, symbols of the soul's journey and the church's ordered hierarchy. By the Renaissance, poets and naturalists revived classical motifs. Virgil's Georgics, widely read across Europe, praised bee society as a microcosm of human virtues, temperance, courage against predators, and harmonious labor. Shakespeare alluded to busy as a bee in Henry V, using the simile to underscore collective morale, turning the tide in battle. These works planted the image of the hive as both a moral exemplar and a source of endless metaphor. In 19th century France, Napoleon Bonaparte adopted the bee as his dynastic emblem, evoking the Merovingian kings who used the insect as a symbol of continuity and rebirth. The bee's representation on Napoleonic robes and state regalia linked his new empire to ancient traditions, claiming legitimacy through a shared legacy of order and renewal. Similarly, the Austro-Hungarian monarchy used bees in coat of arms imagery, suggesting that a multi-ethnic empire could function like a vast hive, distinct peoples working synergistically for a common good. In the 20th century, business management literature turned to the bee for lessons on decentralized cooperation. Leadership models borrowed from hive dynamics, balancing autonomy of individual teams, workers with coordinated direction, queen, or executive leadership. Terms like swarm intelligence emerged in computer science, describing how simple agents following basic rules can exhibit complex, adaptive group behavior, paralleling how ants or bees find optimal foraging paths. Simultaneously, environmental movements elevated the bee to a sentinel species. The phenomenon of colony collapse disorder in the early 2000s sharpened public awareness. If bees could no longer maintain their hives, what did that say about human-managed ecosystems? Conservationists used bee health as a barometer for biodiversity, drawing on ancient wisdom, bees as connectors between cultivated and wild spaces, to argue for sustainable agricultural practices and pesticide regulations. Today, urban beekeeping projects dot city rooftops, reviving the ancient concept of movable hives for community education and local honey production. Public art installations feature giant honeycomb sculptures, inviting people to reflect on communal interdependence. Fashion and graphic design co-opt the hexagon's geometry, an efficient space-saving pattern for logos and brand identities, subtly invoking notions of synergy and precision. In digital governance, blockchain technology is sometimes likened to bee communication, distributed ledgers maintained by many nodes, ensuring collective trust without a single central authority. Tech conferences feature bee tracks, workshops on decentralized collaboration, echoing Aristotle's first insights on how organisms coordinate without a central planner. As we reflect on these layers of symbolism, a comforting vision emerges, the hive as a model of balanced order, each member contributing according to role, yet free to act within those roles, leadership guiding rather than dictating, unity forged through gentle constraint rather than oppressive force. Bees remind us that cooperation need not negate individuality. Each forager chooses its path, yet all serve the hive's larger purpose. Moreover, The bee's divine associations from Ra's tears to Christian allegory invite us to consider the sacred in cooperation. Just as honey carried prayers in incense-filled temples, our collective labours weave the intangible threads of community, culture and shared destiny. So whether you admire the Roman legal protections around apiaries or program algorithms inspired by swarm intelligence, pause to savour the deeper lesson. Societies flourish when they balance structure with flexibility, order with autonomy, and earthly toil with a sense of something greater, an unspoken nectar that unites us in purpose and shared flourishing. Pliny describes several hive types, from simple hollowed logs to elaborate wooden boxes bound with iron hoops. The preferred model, he writes, consists of rectangular wooden frames assembled into stacks, each frame fitted with a thin strip of papyrus or vine twig that serves as a guide for comb construction. This modular design allows beekeepers to inspect individual tiers without destroying comb, facilitating brood checks and honey harvests. Pliny instructs that the wood be of fir or pine, both resistant to rot and easy to work, and warns against using aromatic woods, cedar or juniper, which bees might shun. He also emphasizes hive orientation. Entrances should face south or southeast to capture the morning sun, warming the colony and encouraging early foraging. Hives were often elevated on stone pedestals or stood atop low masonry walls to reduce moisture ingress and deter vermin. A thatched or tiled roof, fashioned from broken roof tiles or overlapping terracotta shards, protected the colony from rain and severe summer sun, maintaining a stable internal temperature crucial for brood development. One of Pliny's most innovative recommendations is the practice of hive rotation. He advises beekeepers to shift hives among apiary rows on a set schedule, every 6 weeks in spring and every 8 weeks in summer, to align colonies with peak nectar flows. Early season hives follow blossoms of wild mustard and cherry, mid-season hives move toward buckthorn and clover, late season frames reach lavender and thyme fields. By matching colonies to flowering calendars, Romans maximized honey production and prevented starvation when local blooms subsided. Pliny notes that rotation also disrupts the life cycles of pests and pathogens. Apiaries left in one place for too long risked mite infestations and wax moth proliferation. Regular relocation, coupled with comb replacement, kept hives healthy and productive. Where earlier cultures used rudimentary smoke, Pliny prescribes a controlled smouldering mixture. He recommends dry fern fronds, aromatic myrtle leaves, and damp straw in measured proportions, equal parts of each, piled on a clay brazier beneath the hive's entrance. The damp straw ensures slow, cool smoke, while myrtle's fragrant oils lull bees rather than agitate them. He describes the ideal smoke as pale and thin, rising in gentle spirals rather than dense clouds. Too much smoke would drive bees to gorge on honey and panic, risking comb rupture. Too little smoke left them defensively clustered on the comb walls. Properly administered, the smoke quiets guard bees and allows the apiarist to inspect combs, reframe cells, and harvest honey with minimal sting and disruption to colony order. Envision a Roman beekeeper at dawn, the air rich with olive blossom fragrance, as he gently lights a small bundle of fern and myrtle. Grey smoke drifts into hive entrances, a tender lullaby that calms the hive's residents. He then slides wooden frames apart, the faint golden tint of honeycomb catching early sunlight. Each frame, meticulously rotated through the seasons and crafted to precise dimensions, represents centuries of empirical refinement, proof that in ancient Rome, even the humble bee served as both subject and teacher in the grand experiment of agroscience. In ancient Rome, honey wasn't merely a pantry staple. It was woven into the very fabric of law, medicine, and ritual. Its golden viscosity lent sweetness to food and wine. Its natural antiseptic properties healed wounds, and its purity became the standard against which honesty and integrity were measured in the courts. Imagine a bustling Roman kitchen at midday. Slaves grind wheat for pizza rustica, while another scoop stirs honey into a pot of spelt porridge. Honey was the primary sweetening agent in a world before cane or beet sugar. It flavoured everything from condiments like garum mixed with honey and vinegar, to the celebrated melamelamum, apples poached in honeyed wine and spiced with cinnamon. Cakes libum offered to household deities were brushed with honey glaze, promising divine favour in exchange for sweetness. Because honey did not ferment as readily as grape must, it also preserved pastries and dried fruits, extending their shelf life for banquets or emergency rations. Physicians like Aulus Cornelius Celsus and Pedanius Dioscorides noted honey's remarkable healing power. In Celsus's De Medicina, he prescribes honey poultices for suppurating wounds, advising, dress the ulcer with soft lint dipped in honey and wine, renewing daily until the flesh is cleansed. Honey's high sugar content draws fluid from tissues, osmotic effect, while its low pH and hydrogen peroxide content inhibit bacterial growth. In battlefield camps, Medici carried small phials of honey-based ointments. A soldier's gash from a gladius or sling stone was first rinsed with wine, then smeared with a mixture of honey, vinegar, and pulverized resin. This sticky salve sealed the wound against air and microbes, reducing infection and promoting granulation. Poultices, cloths soaked in honey and crushed leaves of aloe or plantain, soothed inflamed skin and drew out poisons. Even dental practitioners recommended a paste of honey and ground myrrh to ease toothache and treat gum disease. And so, our journey draws to a gentle close. We've wandered Rome's bustling streets at dawn, felt the fierce resolve of warrior queens on distant plains, and discovered the sacred artistry of ancient beekeepers, each story a whisper across time, inviting you to lean in and listen. If tonight's voyage stirred your imagination, there is so much more waiting, just beyond the horizon. From forgotten corners of history to the subtle wonders of the natural world, our channel is your companion for slow, immersive explorations that soothe the mind even as they satisfy your curiosity. Rest a moment now, let the soft hum of your fan blend with the echoes of cobblestone traffic, the distant chime of swords on shields, or the low drone of bees at work. Feel the hush settle in your chest as you drift between past and present. When you're ready for the next chapter, simply tap into another video, perhaps a tale of medieval craftsmen forging swords by firelight, or the quiet genius of ancient astronomers charting the night sky. Whatever the path, each story is crafted to guide you toward calm reflection and restful wonder. If you haven't already, please subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss our next slow, soothing history. And if tonight's story found a place in your thoughts, leave a comment with what captivated you most and where in the world you're joining us from. Thank you for sharing this twilight hour. Here, every whisper of the past becomes a lullaby, and together we'll continue to wander, discover, and dream. Sleep well until our next gentle adventure.